Hey there. So my next guest, awesome background in the video game space, worked for some really cool companies on some really awesome games, but he decided that he wanted to strike out on his own when he saw the opportunity. So he went indie and he's been putting out indie games for ages now, but he has so much story to tell. This was an amazing interview. I know you're all going to love it. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Gamerpreneur podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bradford Carlton. Today, I have a very special guest with us. I have Nathan Fouts. Hey there, Nathan. How's it going?
Hey, everybody. I'm doing great.
Beautiful. Where do you hail from, Nathan?
I'm from Indiana. I'm in southern Indiana. I'm near Louisville, Kentucky, the Kentucky Derby and all that stuff, bourbon, things like that. But I'm in Indiana. Nice
little area. I've driven through there a couple times. Okay.
Yeah, it's great.
Beautiful. All right, Nathan, that's the extent of our small talk. So let's get right into the real meat and potatoes of this. Why don't you begin by just telling us a little bit about yourself, and then we can go from there.
Sure. So I've been in the game industry since 1998 professionally. I used to work at Running with Scissors. They made Postal and Postal 2, and I worked on Postal 2. I'm 46. So I've been gaming most of my life, like personally, and I just thought couldn't believe how fun and cool games were, and so I had to figure out how they got made when I was a teenager. And so I started making them on my own back in the 90s, and then I got a job at a really regular, boring chemical peptide synthesis company doing code for them after college, and I had already sent out about 40 resumes by postal mail. This is the 90s. So, and that was when Running with Scissors finally found me after I was already working in this place for about 8 months. And they said, "Hey, do you want to work on games instead?" And I was like, "Sure." This is awful. So yeah, I started with them, and I haven't looked back since. Yeah, it's been a great, crazy ride. I worked at all kinds of weird places.
Beautiful. All right. So, Nathan, I start every interview with a single question. That wasn't really a question. So, first question, all right? I ask everybody this. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being high, how weird are you?
I look like a 5, but I'm probably like a 7 or so, or an 8.
You have to add a couple points just for having worked on Postal, right?
I'm pretty weird. I don't know. There's some really weird people. So it depends on the topic. How's that?
Certainly.
Yeah.
All right. Now, this is the Gamerpreneur podcast, so I do need your gaming cred. I know you've worked on games, but when did you first start playing?
So my babysitter, when I was about 5 or 6, they had an Atari over there. And what would happen is the boy that, I guess it was like 1980. So the boy that was, I was closest in age to, he was like a year younger than me. He and I would hang out after school. And then their older brother, who was like a teenager, would come and play on the Atari. And he would play Berserk and the little robot game. And what would happen is he wouldn't get home till later because of like sports practice or something. And I would be obsessed, and I would keep bugging my friend. I was just like, "Please let me play. Please let me play." So I would play Berserk, and I ended up beating his high score. And he was really mad. And so then he sat down and he had to beat it afterwards. But yeah, this is like the 70s or 80s or whatever. I was right on the front of like Atari and a ColecoVision, and all my friends had consoles except for me. So I was pretty sad. Yeah.
Okay. So you've had the opportunity to play pretty much everything. What are you playing now?
Well, I'm usually play retro styled games. So I'm playing Aggelos. I think it's Aggelos. It's a really nice Wonder Boy style Metroidvania. So I used to play Wonder Boy on like the Sega Master System, and played like I know they remade it and stuff, but I played the Wonder Boy 3 that was really fun, where you turn into animals. So I'm playing this like It's kind of styled after Wonder Boy. You don't turn into animals, but you have these really cool elemental powers. And the level design is just really lovely, and it's just really well thought out. And it's so I could do with fancier art, but it's pretty good. And it's very fun. And I'm also playing R-Type Final 2. I'm a big shoot 'em up fan, and I think they did a good job with that game. I don't play a lot of huge blockbuster games. I'll admit to that. But occasionally I do. So like I played through Dark Souls 2 a little while ago. That's about as big as I get. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Now, you've been playing since video games first started, more or less, right? So if you had to choose one as your all-time favorite, which one is it?
That's kind of easy. Like it's Robotron 2084. So if I can get it in the arcade, it's the best game. I just love it. I'm pretty good at it too. Not like world class, but pretty good. And it's fun. It's very deep. And if we used to get so good that we had to crank up I used to play it running with scissors. And we would have to crank up the dip switches so that it was like level 10 difficulty, and the live count was like you wouldn't get it for like, 1 million points or something crazy like that, or 100,000. We crank it way up because we got way too good at it. But it's a blast. It's a very exciting game because even though it looks simple, there's a lot of variety to it. So it's fun.
Beautiful. All right. So let's enough games. Let's talk about the preneur part. So you started out in a job you didn't particularly like, and then you moved over and you started working in the games world. So can you give us a little bit more about your professional background? Kind of what happened after working with Running with Scissors and then thereafter?
Right. So I worked at Running with Scissors for several years, and they're a really cool company, but kind of punk, kind of on the fringe. Pretty wild ride. Like we didn't always have consistent pay. And it got real rocky where we basically just ran out of money. So then I started to work. I had to find a new job, and fortunately found another game job over in Florida. So Running with Scissors out in Arizona. So then I suddenly am moving cross country to Florida, and I ended up working at In Space. So they made a couple different games. They're a pretty cool company too. They made a Duke Nukem game, playing into the babes, which is hilarious. They made a Danger Girl game. I think they made Geist on a GameCube. So they were interesting to work for because they had licenses. So they would work on licenses for at one point they were working on Austin Powers and things like that. Anyway, it wasn't, it was okay. But then the Running with Scissors team contacted me again, and they were just like, hey, we're going to make this new Postal, which was Postal 2. You want to come work on that? And I was like, sure. So I left In Space, went back to Tucson, worked on Postal 2. And I, like I said, I don't usually play multiplayer online games, but I helped design and code that multiplayer game, and it was pretty darn fun. They had an online component called Share the Pain. And then they ran out of money again. So then I went to work for Insomniac Games, and I shipped Resistance and Ratchet and Clank Tools of Destruction with them, and they were really just amazing company. Like I played through that giant Spider-Man game. That was really fun. Recently. So anyway, I worked for them for a few years. And then the entrepreneur part really came around when I was there, and there was the Xbox 360, the old, what they call it, the Blade dashboard, right? It had just come out. This is around 2006 or so, and 2007. And I saw Geometry Wars, and it was a downloadable game, which was new. You're just like, you didn't buy it in a box. And you're like, I don't, that's weird. And I learned that it had made $2 million. And I was like, what? 2 people worked on this and it made $2 million? That's crazy. So so then I started thinking about it. I talked to my wife, and we decided she still has a job, fortunately, but I decided what if I go indie, independent, which was kind of new back then. This is around the time of Braid and stuff just starting to come around and everything like that. And Geometry Wars is the start of all the big money. And so I split off and I founded Mommy's Best Games.
Beautiful. Okay. And so what exactly was your role when you had a job? You programmer, designer? How was that?
Right. I was paid a programmer,
Okay.
typically like a gameplay programmer.
Okay. And what has it been like transitioning into, I mean, you've probably been doing it for a few years, but what is it like making that transition over into being an entrepreneur?
Um, Pretty smooth. I'm pretty disciplined and self-driven, and that is a huge part of being an indie game developer. The hardest part is staying on track. Basically, if you work for yourself as an entrepreneur, no one's telling you what to do, basically, which is a blessing and a curse, right? So you have to lay it all out and make sure you stay on target. And so for me, suddenly, I like to do a lot of it. So now I was suddenly in charge of like level design and sound design. You know what I mean? Like a lot of things I wasn't typically in charge of. So that took some years to get used to.
Okay. Is it still just you?
Primarily. So my wife actually owns half the company, and occasionally she does chime in on the design, like, which I think is pretty cool. We made a mobile game called Finger Derpy, and it's a very silly game, very fun, still free to play if anybody wants to try it. It's got ads and stuff, but it's very reasonable. And so you control little horses, and you tap the screen to run their hooves. But the cool part is you can run like this. You know, it's cool. The cool part is you actually control their hoof kind of quap style. Like you're actually, when you tap, he tries to move his hoof, but it moves the opposite. So it gets derpy when your horse goes the wrong way, and it's all backwards, and it's very fun. And so she came up with the idea of like, what if you tap on the screen like you're running?
I love it.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay. Now you said that you're motivated and self-driven. Other than that, what other unique qualities or skills or talents do you think you possess? Because, there's plenty of people out there who talk about going off and doing their own thing. They sit around complaining about their jobs, but you managed to do it and you've been able to survive with it. So like, what's different about you as opposed to everybody else?
I'm lucky enough to be like half brain math, half brain art. So I can draw pretty well too. So I'm artistic, and have a good imagination. So that's helped me specifically with games. And I like to do the art in the games. But also from a business standpoint, I'm open to a lot of options. So we actually do contract work sometimes too. And I try to be on top of it and like look for work from other, like making games for other companies.
All right. So, what would you say has kind of been the biggest challenge in running this indie studio? So I'm looking for advice. I try to make my show about advice for my audience, not necessarily just to make you look good, which is part of my goal here. But, if someone wanted to go indie, you've kind of blazed that trail. What do you think others need to know?
It's always changing. And it's specifically hard for me when I want to do like retro stuff and I'm stuck in the past. So personally, I like premium games. I like to simply buy the game and own it typically. And I dabble, like I said, with mobile. But so for instance, our next game is called Weapon of Choice DX, when we're remastering our games. And that comes out like September 2nd. And it's $6. And you just buy it. And you have it. So I love that. But that's not always the trend, right? So if you want to stay really successful or be really successful, you got to be willing to step outside of what you think you should hold true to, and experiment and watch trends. And, because they're trendy, they might fall through. So you got to watch out for fads. But you've also got to keep your eye on where things are headed. And so, for instance, if I want to stay in physical, okay, but that's going to be really difficult. If I want to stay in premium, so you look at Game Pass, the Netflix of games on Xbox One, that's changing things and how games are getting bought. So you got to keep your eye on like what's happening in the future there a little bit and start planning for the long term.
Absolutely. Okay. Now, Nathan, I'd like to hop in a time machine with you. I want to go back in time with you. And we'll say when you first joined Running with Scissors, right? You get to go and you get to talk to little Nathan back then, young and full of vigor and wanting to change the world, right? And you get to go up to young Nathan and you get to tell him, everything that you've experienced, all the good, all the bad, all the ups, all the downs. You can impart all of your wisdom and knowledge and experience into him. But if there was only one thing you absolutely had to make sure he understood and knew, what would that one thing be?
You got to balance outside advice with your internal drive more. So it's really good to be pig-headed in a way, but sometimes it hurts you when it leads you down to be stubborn to a point and then yield at some point when it's clear it's not working.
Do you have any examples of that?
Well, it goes both ways. So the guy that made the Dishwasher Dead Samurai game, he was one of the earlier really big success stories. Ska Studios, James Silva, he was a really big success there, and he's stuck with his game long enough and polished it enough that it was great and it sold really well, and then I felt like I shipped some games quicker than I should have. It's a tough balance. And then recently I made an arcade style adventure game called Pig Eat Ball, but that took me 6 years. So that, I think that might've been too much, so it's a very tough balance to listen to people saying, stop, you got to ship this thing, get off of it. And then other people are probably saying, probably told James, okay, ship it, get off of it. And then he then worked a little bit longer on it. He did not. I don't think he worked 6 years on it, though. I think 6 years is pretty long.
Sure.
For a game.
Okay. Now, Nathan, I believe that we learn the most in our life from our failures, not necessarily our successes. Because when you try something the first time you succeed, you may not know quite what happened. It might have been luck. But if you fail, you got to take a look at it. You got to figure out what went wrong. You'll be able to move forward, grow, and then iterate until you succeed in the future. So I'd like to ask you, what do you consider your biggest failure in life, and what did you learn from it?
Geez, in life, not just game development or something.
I mean, every action in your life has led you to this moment. So, what has been a defining challenge that you've been able to overcome?
That's a tough one. I might just have my mind on games right now.
Go right ahead. Yeah, sure.
So all I can kind of think about is we had a big game called Grapple Buggy, and it never shipped, never, and it's been stuck in development hell forever. I call it cryostasis, and the thing was, I got too big about it, too high and mighty about it, and made too much story sort of in it. And I should have stuck with the roots of it being an action game. And I had a ton of momentum around it, and now it's kind of dead. And so people still ask about it, but I should have buckled down and finished that game. At least professionally, that makes me the saddest that we have never finished Grapple Buggy.
Okay.
So
well, thank you for sharing. Now, kind of on the flip side of that question, what is something you're working to improve on yourself today?
Personally, just really listening to others and trying to see their perspective as much as possible.
Wonderful. I'm right there with you. All right. One more fun question before we start bringing this in for a landing. What is something that you think people misunderstand about you the first time they meet you?
I don't know. I try to be pretty WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get. But I did say I'm pretty weird, so they probably think I like sports, and I like to play sports. I don't like to watch sports, and also I'm from the Midwest, so everybody thinks that. So maybe that. I don't know.
All right, fantastic. Now, this has been a fantastic interview, Nathan. Thank you so much. How do people find you? Where are you at in social media? Contact information, all that, please.
Sure. I'm basically Mommy's Best Games. So on Twitter, they're on Facebook. There's a YouTube channel where we put our trailers out. And if you go to mommysbestgames.com, you can sign up for our mailing list, and we let people know about the newest stuff. I barely, bug you like a couple times a year. And we started a Mommy's Best Games Discord as well. But if you can email me there anywhere.
Okay. Why Mommy's Best Games? I got to ask.
Oh, I don't know. My buddy and I were very wholesome, and like we just would joke about how our moms made the best cookies, and they were the best. They made the best food, and like we were going to make the best games. So it sounds really corny, but most of my games are really violent, and so I find gross. So it's a funny contrast.
Okay, I actually do want to go back. What was it like working on like? Postal was like a step above, right? Like, what was it like doing that? Like, you were changing the industry.
I didn't work on Postal 1 that much. I was on the very tip end of Postal 1.
Even still, Postal 2 was
pretty nuts. Working on Postal 2 was about as cool as it could possibly get. It was sort of like the movie Scarface or something. I don't know, or like Casino. It was an insane work environment, but in a good way. And I loved it. Like, it was very crazy working there. And we were trying to push the envelope. Like, we were trying to be the bad boys for sure. So it was extremely fun.
I love it. Okay, Nathan, as we wrap this up, do you have any final thoughts you want to share? Anything I didn't ask you think we still need to cover?
No, thanks. Thanks for having me. Please check out my games, and I like baking pie a lot. So I hope everybody that is into games pushes on one of their hobbies that is totally independent from the computers too. So bake pies, take walks, find somebody. So it's good to have a hobby outside of the computers is what I think helps me too.
Wonderful. All right, Nathan, thank you so much. I genuinely appreciate you taking the time to come on with us today.
It was awesome. Thanks, Brad. Thanks, everybody, for watching. I really appreciate it, too.
Of course. And for everybody else, I'm going to remind you all, don't be just a gamer, be a gamerpreneur.